So every time you come into a new section, of course, you're going to have this little knowledge schema at the top. Make sure that you have a look at it because, as I've said in a previous video, knowing the geographical process of inquiry and the order you follow through with things is important. Plan it, collect it, present it, write about it, draw your conclusions and evaluate it. And as we go through each of these, we're going to add these bits here, which are the bits that are taken from the spec. That's these learning outcomes. So the box gives you more detail. This is copied from the spec. These bits here are your kind of knowledge schema. So the idea is that by the time you finish this, you should be able to come back and do some retrieval practice on these sections here. You should be able to come and take a look at each one of these points and unpack them a little bit more. So you can use this when you're going over this for your retrieval practice. Let's take a look at the content that you're covering today. So the planning is the first stage of this. Whenever you're planning here, the first thing that you need to do is to identify the issue that you're going to study. Now, your topic must be any topic from what's in the CS spec, from either Unit 1, which is the one that we've completed, or Unit 2, which is the one that we're going to be doing next year. Now, we're going to be doing this together, so we're going to be doing the topic of rivers, as you know, because we already had the virtual field trip. So what you've got to do here is to identify, first of all, some possible issues or questions. So that's what this bit here is. Plan your inquiry by identifying issues or questions for investigation. So how do you do that? You go through your rivers booklet and you come up with some possible issues we could study. So here's an example for you. This is the actual one that we're going to be doing. How do the river characteristics change as you move downstream? So what you need to do is to take a look scan through the whole of the booklet. You can be looking at the processes that can go on. The characteristics are there. You can be looking at other landforms. You could be looking at flood risk. You could be looking at river management. And I want you to bullet point down here 3 or 4 issues in addition to that one that you could study. Once you've identified what they are, and the thing that I said we are going to be doing is how the river channel characteristics change as you move downstream, is you need to develop your aim. Now, what is your aim? What is your aim? It gives a specific focus for your investigation, and all the way through the inquiry, you're going to try and complete this aim. And whenever we come back at the end, when we've finished it all and we look at our conclusion, we're going to consider what you have found out in relation to your aim. So it is the focus of the investigation. It's very, very important. So you need to, let's go back up here to the spec here, you need to develop one aim. Let's have a look. How do you do that? You start with a verb, to investigate, then the aspect that you're going to be looking at, the downstream changes, and then a reference to the location along the Colin River. Now, you need to draft out an aim. If you've been listening carefully, you may well see that the aim is pretty much there for you. So you take those, pop that in there, and that is your aim. Let's go back up here to our checklist. We identify issues for investigation, develop an aim, and we have then a minimum of 2 appropriate hypotheses. Let's go down and take a wee look at that. Now, the first thing that I need to do is to tell you what this word hypothesis means. I don't believe that you've come across this yet in science, but you will. So whenever their science teachers are covering this with you, this is your opportunity to show them how smart you are because you know what this word is, courtesy of being a cool geographer. So what is a hypothesis? It's a statement of what the theory suggests should happen. What the geographical theory suggests should happen, and that's the thing that you're going to test in your fieldwork. Now, a hypothesis in science you would test in a laboratory, but us being geographers, we like to try to get out into the real world, so we go and test that during our fieldwork. What's the theory suggests should happen that we're going to test during our fieldwork? Now, during the fieldwork itself, we're going to collect data that will allow us to assess whether or not what you're expecting actually happens in the real world. Does the river do precisely what the theory suggests? The answer is probably going to be mostly, but there will be things where it behaves slightly differently. There are things that are unique about the Colin River, some of the things that we've seen in the way down, in the virtual fieldwork video that you did. You will see that, for example, there are management strategies used in the river. So if you're going to look at how wide and how deep the river is, and you have stopping the lateral erosion because of the gabions you've placed there, then that's going to modify the natural processes. So any real river in the real world, for a variety of human factors and indeed physical factors, will not necessarily be precisely what the textbook says. But that's what you're going to be doing. Is my hypothesis, is this statement of what the theory says should happen, we're going to test that. Is that actually going to happen? So you have got to draw up hypotheses. We're going to be looking at 3 characteristics. It says up here you need a minimum of 2 appropriate hypotheses. Here we have the 3 that we're going to do. River width. As you move downstream, width increases. What you need to do is, using your Rivers book if needs be, go and complete those other 2 as well. Now, the next thing that we're going to move on to is to take a little bit look at the background theory for our hypothesis. And this is a little bit of planning ahead for a stage that's coming later in our geographical process of inquiry. Plan it, then collect it, then present it, then analyse and interpret. Now, do you remember what I told you those words meant? To describe and explain what is happening in the graph and why. And the why brings you back to your theory. Why do the rivers change as they move downstream? Why does the width increase? Why does the depth increase? Why does velocity increase? What is the background theory? Now, this is similar to what you would have in your notes. We've covered this because we look at the downstream changes, and what you need to do is to go back into your books and you need to answer those. Now, the answers should be quite long. A good paragraph, maybe even 2 paragraphs of this, explaining why, using good geographical terminology. So you'll be referring to erosion, but I would also like you to refer to some of the different types of erosion that take place and the direction. So you'll be referring to lateral erosion, you'll be referring to vertical erosion, and also then you'll be explaining why velocity increases as you move downstream. And for that one, you'll be talking about the fact that the river's discharge increases as you move downstream, the tributaries feed in, there's more discharge, and the river runs faster. So between your books, and you might even want to go and do a little bit of internet research on that one, put some good detail down there, please, and that is your theory, and that will link back to your hypothesis, which, remember, your hypothesis is what the theory suggests should happen. So if you've got a good chunk of theory there, that's going to help you with that little section.